The moment before everything changes. Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with it honestly. When was the last time you woke up and thought, yes, this is exactly the life I wanted? When was the last morning you opened your eyes and felt genuinely, deeply at peace with the direction everything was moving? If you had to search for the answer, if it took you more than 3 seconds, then this video is for you. Because most people watching this right now are caught in a strange in-between place. They're not miserable in a way they can point to and explain at a dinner table. They haven't lost their job or their partner or their health. On paper, everything looks fine. The bills are getting paid. The relationships are functional. The routines are in place. But something underneath all of it, something quiet, something stubborn, refuses to stay quiet anymore. You feel it when you're lying in bed at night and your mind won't stop running. You feel it on Sunday evenings when a strange dread starts settling in your chest before the week even begins. You feel it in the middle of a conversation when you catch yourself nodding along, performing interest, performing contentment, while somewhere inside, a completely different voice is asking, is this really it? Is this the whole thing? That feeling. That persistent, low-grade ache. That's not anxiety. That's not burnout. That's not a chemical imbalance that needs to be managed. That is the most important signal your inner life has ever sent you, and most of the time, we do everything in our power to shut it up. We scroll. We work longer hours. We make plans we don't intend to keep. We tell ourselves we'll deal with it after this project, after this season, after this year. We stay busy because busy is safe. Busy means we don't have to sit with the silence long enough to hear what it's actually saying. The lie of the normal life. There is a version of life that most of us were handed before we were old enough to question whether we wanted it. Study hard. Get a stable job. Find a partner. Build a routine. Be responsible. Don't take risks you can't afford. Be grateful for what you have. Stop being so dramatic. These instructions were handed to us by people who genuinely meant well. Parents, teachers, religious communities, cultures, all of them passing down a blueprint that worked, or at least appeared to work, for the people before them. And because we received these messages when we were young and impressionable, we didn't receive them as suggestions. We received them as facts about how reality operates. So we built our lives accordingly. And for a while, maybe a long while, it worked. The structure gave us safety. The expectations gave us direction. The routine gave us predictability. And predictability, when you're moving fast enough through life, can be mistaken for meaning. But then something happens. It might come on gradually, the way fog rolls in, imperceptible until you realize you can no longer see clearly. Or it might arrive suddenly, triggered by a single moment that somehow crystallizes everything you've been half-knowing for years. Whatever the shape of it, the realization is the same: you have been living a life that fits you the way a suit fits a mannequin. It looks right from a distance. But when you try to move in it, really move, breathe, run, feel, it doesn't fit at all. Jung wrote extensively about what he called the persona, the mask we create to navigate society. The persona is not inherently a bad thing. We all need one. We all wear different versions of ourselves in different contexts, and that's not dishonesty, that's social intelligence. The problem arises when the persona becomes so dominant, so thick and so well constructed, that you lose touch with what's underneath it. When you can no longer locate the difference between who you are performing and who you actually are, you are in what Jung would describe as a psychic emergency. You have traded the self for the survival of the image. You have sacrificed the interior life on the altar of external approval. And the culture we live in is spectacularly good at making this trade feel not just acceptable, but virtuous. We are rewarded for performance. We are liked, promoted, praised, and included when we play the role well. The person who seems happy gets more social invitations. The employee who projects confidence gets more responsibility. The partner who acts fine doesn't start difficult conversations. So we learn to perform. And the performance becomes so automatic, so deeply embedded in how we move through the world, that we forget it's a performance at all. Until the exhaustion becomes undeniable. Because here is what nobody tells you about wearing a mask for decades: it is physically, emotionally, and psychologically exhausting. The energy required to maintain a version of yourself that is consistently out of alignment with who you actually are is enormous, and it is borrowed energy. At some point, the debt comes due. That debt shows up as the numbness you feel in conversations that used to excite you. It shows up as the irritability that surfaces over small things because you don't have the emotional bandwidth left to absorb anything. It shows up as the strange grief that washes over you sometimes in quiet moments, not for anything specific, just a general mourning for something you can't quite name. You are mourning yourself. The version of you that got set aside somewhere along the way. Here is the thing Jung understood that most psychological frameworks miss: the unlived life is not neutral. It is not simply an opportunity cost. It is an active wound. The parts of yourself you have suppressed, the desires you have denied, the paths you have refused to walk, they do not simply disappear because you ignored them. They accumulate. They press. They find other ways of making themselves known, often in the most inconvenient and painful ways possible. Your anxiety is not irrational. Your restlessness is not a character flaw. Your dissatisfaction is not ingratitude. These are symptoms of a deeply intelligent system, the human psyche, trying to signal to you that something has gone profoundly wrong with the navigation. Normal is not the same as healthy. Stable is not the same as alive. And the life that looks fine from the outside can be the most suffocating prison imaginable from the inside. The first step toward anything real is being willing to admit this. Not to the world. Not on social media. Just to yourself, in the honest privacy of your own mind, where none of the performances are required. Something is wrong. And it has been wrong for longer than you've been willing to admit. That admission is not weakness. It is the beginning of the only kind of courage that actually matters. Your pain is trying to tell you something. We live in a civilization that is deeply, structurally allergic to discomfort. Not physical discomfort specifically, though we manage that aggressively too, but the particular kind of discomfort that comes from sitting with an unresolved inner life. The discomfort of uncertainty. The discomfort of grief. The discomfort of wanting something you can't quite articulate and not knowing how to get there. We have built an entire global economy around the avoidance of this discomfort. Every notification, every streaming platform, every algorithm, every convenient service, all of it is, in one form or another, a tool for making sure you never have to sit with yourself for too long. And we are so grateful for it. Because sitting with yourself, genuinely sitting with yourself in silence without distraction, is one of the most confronting things a human being can do. But here is what that avoidance costs you. When you treat emotional pain as a problem to be eliminated rather than information to be understood, you cut off access to the most important guidance system you possess. You learn to manage the signal without ever addressing the source. And so the source, whatever is actually wrong, whatever actually needs to change, continues unchallenged, quietly poisoning the parts of your life that matter most. Jung was one of the first thinkers to propose, seriously and rigorously, that psychic suffering has meaning. That the symptoms we experience, anxiety, depression, chronic dissatisfaction, emotional flatness, the feeling of being fundamentally out of place, are not random misfires of a broken system. They are the psyche's attempt to communicate something urgent. Anxiety, when you strip away the neurological language, is often the experience of living in a way that is fundamentally misaligned with your own values, desires, or sense of self, and knowing it, somewhere below the surface, even if you can't articulate it consciously. It is the gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be, expressing itself through the body because the mind has refused to acknowledge it. Depression, in many cases, is not the absence of feeling. It is the suppression of feeling. It is what happens when a person has spent so long refusing to grieve what needs to be grieved, refusing to feel the rage that's actually present, refusing to acknowledge the losses that have accumulated, that the emotional system essentially goes on lockdown. It is not emptiness. It is a vault that has been sealed shut. Chronic dissatisfaction, that persistent sense that something is missing even when all the external metrics say your life is going well, is often the experience of a person who has fed everything except the thing that actually matters to them. Who has built a life that serves everyone else's vision of what their life should look like, and has quietly starved the self in the process. These are not diagnoses to be afraid of. They are descriptions to be curious about. What is your pain actually pointing to? When you lie awake at 3 in the morning with your mind spinning, what is it spinning around? Not the surface-level thoughts, not the work deadline or the argument with your partner or the bill you forgot to pay. Underneath those, what is the deeper anxiety? What is the thing you would have to confront if you stopped running from it? When you feel that hollow feeling in the middle of a day that should be fine, what is it that's missing? Not the coffee or the sleep or the social interaction. What actual substance is absent from your life? And when the sadness comes, and it does come, for everyone, in the quiet moments when the distractions fall away, what is it about? What, specifically, are you mourning? These questions are uncomfortable. They're supposed to be. But they are the right questions, because they are the questions that lead somewhere. Jung spoke about what he called the shadow, the part of ourselves that we have rejected, suppressed, or refused to acknowledge. The shadow is not simply the dark or evil parts of ourselves, though it can include those. More broadly, it is everything about us that we have decided is unacceptable. The anger we were taught not to feel. The ambition we were taught was selfish. The grief we were told to get over. The desires we were taught were wrong. The shadow does not disappear when we suppress it. It goes underground. And from underground, it runs things. It shapes your choices in ways you don't understand. It sabotages relationships and opportunities. It generates symptoms, anxiety, depression, inexplicable rage, compulsive behaviors, that seem to come from nowhere because you have no idea they are coming from the very part of yourself you've been most carefully avoiding. Making the unconscious conscious, bringing the shadow into the light and looking at it directly, is not a comfortable process. It involves confronting things about yourself that you would very much prefer not to be true. It involves grieving choices you made, and paths you didn't take, and parts of yourself you left behind. But it is the only process by which genuine change becomes possible. Because you cannot change what you will not acknowledge. And you cannot grow beyond the boundaries of what you're willing to face. Your pain is not your enemy. It is the most honest thing about you. It is the part of your inner life that refused to be pacified, that kept pressing, kept showing up, kept refusing to accept the managed version of your life as sufficient. Nothing arrives by accident. There is a concept that sounds, at first, like mysticism. But the more carefully you examine it, the more you realize it is actually a sophisticated description of something deeply psychological. Jung called it synchronicity. He defined it as the meaningful coincidence of two or more events that are not causally related but are connected by their significance to the person experiencing them. In plain language, the experience of something happening in the outside world that seems to speak directly to what's happening inside you, at exactly the moment you needed it to. You're at a crossroads in your life, genuinely unsure which direction to go, and you pick up a book that addresses your exact situation. You're in the middle of a crisis of meaning and you run into an old friend who says something that reframes everything. You're on the edge of making a decision you've been avoiding for months, and then something small happens, a conversation, an image, a piece of music, that gives you the clarity you couldn't manufacture through thinking alone. These moments feel magical. They feel like the universe is speaking to you. And while the metaphysics of that claim are worth examining carefully, there is something real and important at the center of the experience. Here is one way to understand what's actually happening. Your unconscious mind is processing vastly more information than your conscious mind is aware of. It is taking in signals from your environment, your body, your relationships, your past, your desires, and it is working on the questions that matter most to you even when your conscious attention is focused elsewhere. It does not communicate in the language of logic or argument. It communicates in the language of feeling, image, and resonance. When you are ready, not when you think you're ready, but when something deeper than thinking has reached a point of genuine readiness, the unconscious begins to filter your experience differently. Things that were always in your environment start to stand out. Connections you couldn't have manufactured consciously suddenly become visible. Information that was available all along suddenly lands with meaning it didn't have before. This is not magic. This is the human perceptual system operating at a depth most of us never access because we're too busy scrolling. But here is what this means practically for you. If you are watching this video, at this particular moment in your life, something in you chose this. Not randomly. Not by accident. The version of you that is still asleep, still comfortable, still successfully managing the performance of a fine life, that version does not go looking for content like this. It avoids it, because content like this asks uncomfortable questions. The fact that you're here means something is awake enough in you to go looking for exactly this kind of confrontation. Your unconscious is already several steps ahead. It already knows that what you've been doing isn't working. It's already been sending you signals, through your body, through your dreams, through the persistent dissatisfaction you can't quite shake. And now it has led you here. That matters. It is not nothing. Jung believed that when we begin to pay attention to the symbolic dimension of our experience, when we take seriously the information that arrives through feeling and image and resonance rather than logic and argument, the unconscious becomes an ally rather than an obstacle. It begins to guide rather than sabotage. It begins to show you, gently but persistently, the direction of your own becoming. The meaningful coincidences increase. The right people appear. The right information surfaces at the right time. Not because the universe has suddenly decided to cooperate with you, but because you have started operating at a frequency that allows you to perceive and use what was always there. This is a shift in awareness, not a shift in external circumstance. And it begins with taking seriously the experiences that don't fit neatly into rational categories. The dream that stays with you for days and you don't know why. The song that makes you cry even though you can't explain what it's about. The conversation that seems casual but leaves you with the feeling that something important was just said. The video that you almost didn't watch, and then did, and now you're 15 minutes in and something is moving in you that hasn't moved in a long time. These are not coincidences to be dismissed. They are invitations to be considered. The question is, what are you going to do with this one? The terrifying leap and why you must take it. Every transformation in a human life requires a moment of genuine discontinuity. A point where you cannot get from here to there by continuing to do what you've been doing. A point where the only way forward is through something that feels, from the outside, like a kind of death. Jung called this the encounter with the threshold. And the guardian of that threshold, the force that stands between the life you've been living and the life that's waiting for you, is fear. Not danger. Fear. It's important to understand the difference. Danger is real. Danger is the legitimate assessment of actual harm. Danger deserves to be taken seriously and navigated carefully. But fear, the particular kind of fear we're talking about here, is not always proportional to actual danger. It is often the ego's response to the prospect of change itself, regardless of whether the change is harmful or not. The ego's primary function is not your well-being. It is your continuity. Its job, at the most fundamental level, is to maintain the existing structure of your self-concept. And transformation, real transformation, the kind that changes who you are rather than just what you do, is, from the ego's perspective, an existential threat. Because the version of you that emerges from genuine transformation is not the same as the version of you that went in. Something is shed. Something is released. The old identity, or at least the parts of it that were never really yours, has to die. And the ego will do everything in its considerable power to prevent this from happening. It will tell you it's not the right time. There will never be a right time. It will tell you you're not ready. You will never feel ready. It will tell you about all the people who will be disappointed, all the security you'll lose, all the ways this could go wrong. It will be spectacularly creative in constructing scenarios of failure. Because the ego is not stupid, it has been watching your life for years, and it knows exactly which fears to deploy. The fear of disappointing the people you love. The fear of financial instability. The fear of being wrong, of having wasted years on a path that wasn't right, of discovering that the thing you wanted wasn't what you thought it was. The fear of being alone. The fear of being seen, truly seen, without the protection of the persona. These fears are real. They deserve to be acknowledged. But they are not reasons to stay. They are signs that you are standing at the right door. Here is what Jung understood, and what most people who talk about change refuse to say directly: the transformation you need is going to cost you something real. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to happen gradually and painlessly while you maintain everything exactly as it is. There will be loss. There will be grief. There will be a period, possibly a long period, where you feel more lost than you did before you started. This is not a warning to turn back. This is a description of how the process actually works. Because here is also true, on the other side of that loss and grief and disorientation, there is something that you cannot currently access from where you're standing. A degree of aliveness. A depth of meaning. A sense of being genuinely, actually present in your own life rather than watching it go by from a carefully managed distance. You will not get there by thinking your way there. You will not get there by planning carefully or waiting for the right circumstances. You will get there only by moving, imperfectly, uncertainly, with all your fear intact, in the direction of what matters most to you. The leap does not require that you know where you will land. It requires only that you become more afraid of staying than of moving. Most people never reach that point. They manage. They adjust. They find new distractions. They make peace with the slow suffocation of the unlived life and call it maturity. They look back at 30, 40, 50, 60, and they feel, not the sharp pain of a specific regret, but the dull ache of an entire life not fully entered. You are not most people. If you were, you would have stopped watching this 10 minutes ago. The threshold is here. The fear is the confirmation, not the prohibition. And the question is not whether you can do this without being afraid. The question is whether you're willing to do it while being afraid. That is the only kind of courage that exists. The life that was always yours. Here is the last, and perhaps the most important, thing I want to say. No one is coming. I know that's hard to hear. We are conditioned from childhood to believe in rescue. In the right person who will finally understand us. In the right opportunity that will finally make everything click into place. In the right moment when we'll feel ready, when the fear will have passed, when the path forward will be clear enough to make movement feel safe. That moment does not come. Not because life is cruel, but because readiness is not a feeling that precedes action. It is a quality that emerges from it. You do not feel ready and then act. You act, and in the acting, something that resembles readiness begins to build. The responsibility for your life, not for what happened to you, but for what you do with what happened to you, rests entirely with you. Not with the people who shaped your wounds. Not with the systems that constrained your options. Not with the timing of the universe or the cooperation of other people's choices. With you. This is not a blame. It is a liberation. Because the moment you genuinely accept that no one is coming, something extraordinary becomes possible. You stop directing your energy toward waiting, toward hoping, toward the management of disappointment. And you start directing it toward the only thing that was ever actually under your control, your own choices, made one at a time, in the direction of the life you actually want. Jung described the goal of individuation not as the achievement of happiness or success in any conventional sense, but as the full realization of the self. The becoming of who you actually are, including the parts you've been afraid of, including the desires you've been ashamed of, including the truths about yourself that don't fit the version of you that other people find comfortable. This process is never complete. It is the work of a lifetime. But it begins with a single, genuine choice, the choice to stop living someone else's version of your life and to start figuring out what your version actually looks like. What does that mean practically? It means getting honest about what you actually want, not what you should want, not what the people around you expect you to want, but what, in the quiet and honest interior of your own experience, you actually want from this one life you have. It means identifying what you've been avoiding, the conversation you haven't had, the decision you've been delaying, the aspect of yourself you haven't been willing to look at, and moving toward it instead of away from it. It means accepting that the people in your life may not understand the changes you need to make, and making them anyway. Not out of indifference to others, but out of the recognition that living a performance of yourself for the sake of other people's comfort does not actually serve anyone. The most generous thing you can do for the people you love is to be genuinely, honestly, fully yourself in their presence. Everything else is a relationship with a mask. It means being willing to grieve, the time lost, the paths not taken, the version of yourself that got set aside. Grief is not weakness. It is the appropriate response to real loss. And until you grieve it honestly, you will carry it as unacknowledged weight into everything you do next. And it means beginning. Not when things are better. Not when you feel more ready. Not when the circumstances align. Now, with what you have. In the direction of what matters. The authentic life does not look like the life you were sold. It is not cleaner or simpler or more glamorous. In many ways it is harder, because it requires you to be responsible for it in a way that the managed life never demanded. But it is yours. Genuinely, unmistakably, irreducibly yours. And there is a quality of aliveness in something that is genuinely yours, however imperfect, however uncertain, however incomplete, that nothing managed or performed can touch. You have been living at the surface of your own existence for too long. The depth has been there the whole time, waiting. The self you left behind has been there the whole time, waiting. It is still there. The question, the only question that matters now, is whether you're going to go back for it. You've already taken the first step by being here, by staying, by letting these words land somewhere real rather than deflecting them from a safe distance. Something is different now than it was when you pressed play. Something has been named that was previously circling in the dark without a name. Names are power. Acknowledgement is the beginning of agency. And this moment, this exact moment, right now, is the first moment of whatever comes next. Do something with it. Not something dramatic. Not something that requires a plan or a declaration or anyone else's permission. Just something honest. Write down the one thing you know needs to change. Have the conversation you've been avoiding for 6 months. Give yourself an hour this week to sit with the silence and see what it actually says when you stop running from it. Small moves in genuine directions compound into lives. The largest transformations in human history, external and internal both, began with a single person deciding that the gap between who they were and who they needed to be was no longer tolerable. You are at that gap right now. You have been at that gap for longer than you know. And the life that has always been yours, the one that fits, the one that's real, the one that actually moves when you breathe, is not out there somewhere waiting to be discovered. It's in here. It has always been in here. Underneath everything you built to survive, underneath the performance and the persona and the carefully managed presentation of a life that's fine. It's in there. And it is not too late. It is exactly the right time.